All right, I am back in my cozy space. Okay, so first of all, hello, hi. I have the sniffles. It's not COVID or anything like that. I just have the sniffles. But yes, you may have seen this. First of all, hello, hi. It's been a minute. I know. It's just been trying to just get everything together, and there's just been so much, and then a little last minute situation kind of came up, which a good situation. I can't tell you about it though. It's not my project, so I am not at liberty to discuss that. However, it's pretty cool, and I hope you guys get to hear something whenever it's done. But really cool. For those of you saw me in the studio when I did my last book club IG live chat, in which we discussed Parable of the Sower with Amerie's book club's members, Own, Vaughn James, and Megan Duvarney. I always mess up Megan, I always mispronounce your name, your last name. My apologies. But yes, had a great time talking to Megan and Vaughn, and I actually called a couple people as well. And thank you guys for your insights. You guys were amazing. And IG Live chatted, brought a couple people into the chat. Someone was playing on her mom's phone because she was just like, hi, and I was like, hey. I don't know if you guys saw it, but she was really cute. And then I also talked to someone else as well. A couple more people, I think? No, someone else. Just one other person, because that's right, we were running out of time, and had a great conversation about the book too. So I love that. For those of you who don't know or didn't see yet, I don't know when I'm going to drop this video, but I was wearing the same outfit for my Patreon thing. So now I'm going to have a Patreon. I discussed more of that. It's basically just a whole community building thing that I want to do with us in Amerie's book club, as well as just me getting to talk to you. If you've been watching me for a long time, you know I'm always saying how I love talking and chatting, but in real time. And it's hard because sometimes social media can feel like a one-way street. Anyhow, go to my Patreon. I'll put the link below, and you'll see what it's about and what we're doing over there. But yes, and Amerie's book club is really growing very well. Let's get to what this video is about. So it's been a minute. I am able to read a lot more now. It's very important to me that I read at least once a day. I get a session in. Sometimes that session may only be 30 minutes. I don't like those that much because I am not a fast reader. I used to speed read when I was younger, but now it takes me a minute to digest, and I do a lot of rereading. If I come across a passage or a paragraph that I love, I will reread it a couple of times. That's wonderful, but that means that when you have a lot of books to read, you don't necessarily get through them all. And so I don't love that. What I wanted to do though was let you know some of the books that I picked up recently. I've picked up a lot. I will get those in a moment. But I also wanted to let you know how some of the reads went recently. Some of the things that you saw in the last video, in which we were sitting right here, and I was just talking about my purchases and how I acquired books, and I said I wasn't going to do it. By the way, I'm not on a book buying ban now. I'm not on that because I was like, you know what? There are too many great books coming out, and I want to read them. And also, but I'm still really discerning about the books that I pick up. I try to pick up books that I think I will want to, that I will not only enjoy, but that I will keep in my library for a really long time. So that said, I have some physicals right here. There were some that I had for ebooks, and I actually am going to use my Goodreads to, hey, I shook it and something happened, because I want to let you know about some of the books before I forget. Okay, so one of the books, let's just go to Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. There's so many books, and I don't want the video to be too long, because I want to try to be succinct. Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler, and N.K. Jemisin wrote the foreword for this. I think I told you about her Broken Earth series that I have, and some other books, like one is Black Future Month, but I have yet to read all the short stories in there. This book was fantastic. It was an Amerie's book club pick. It was the Amerie's book club pick for January, and it was so good. Love this. I told you already that it was a duology, and it takes place in the year 2032, I believe, and a young girl inadvertently creates a religion or a belief based on the idea that God is change. And there's so many things that she writes about, so many things that actually happen now when you're talking about a dystopian government, you're talking about climate apocalypse driven by climate change, the socioeconomic upheaval that's because of climate change. We're talking about company towns and people who work for companies and are indebted to them, almost like a sharecropping existence, which does exist, which I was shocked to discover that actually does exist. Still, so many of the vegetables and fruits that we get in our stores. I think there was a big expose that came out a couple of years ago, and so that you don't see that as much, I believe. That's been remedied in a big way, but I'm sure it's still so prevalent, and some of those companies are sending groceries to our produce to our stores, in which basically people are living a sharecropping existence, and it's disgusting. So it's eye-opening. This book actually made me do a lot of research outside of the book just to learn more about those kinds of things. So Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. If you haven't read it already, definitely pick it up if you get the chance. White Tears by Hari Kunzru. If you remember, his Red Pill was in late last year, it was one of the Amerie's book club selections. I want to say it was like maybe October, around then. And I loved Red Pill so much that I went out and purchased White Tears immediately, which I read right after I read Red Pill. This is phenomenal. I love Red Pill, and it was an ABC selection. I think I love White Tears even more. I won't tell you what the book is about because I did discuss it in my last book. If you want to look back on the channel, I'm sitting right here in a red sweatsuit or pinkish rosish, a dusty rose sweatsuit, and I'm talking about this book. This book was so good. White Tears is one of my favorite books ever, and it was a New York Times notable book when it came out. One of the best books of the year by the Washington Post, Time, San Francisco Chronicle, NPR, GQ, The Economist, Slate, HuffPost, Book Riot. Times is a book that everyone should be reading right now. Part ghost story, part travelogue, a treatise on race, class, and poverty of the soul. The Washington Post says it was convincing, captivating, elucidates the iniquitous history of white appropriation of black culture. This was phenomenal. Phenomenal. Like, I closed the book and I was like, it was so good. And it made me laugh. You really get in with the main character, but you're so cognizant of how there have been throughout history so many black artists who've created beautiful, wonderful, soul-stirring art and have been forgotten or have been robbed, and therefore the generations after them, their families have been robbed, while people who've stolen their music or stolen the rights to their music and their children have benefited and grown rich. And so this was just phenomenal. White Tears is something that I think everyone should read. Another thing that was really great, that's my most recent one. It was called The Daughter of Yi. See, I wasn't going to edit this because I'm like juggling multiple things, but I feel like, if I mention these things, I should at least put a screenshot in here. But I may not get to that. I'm sorry. I may not be able to do it. I'll try to if I can. But this week is looking a little nuts. The Daughters of Ys, The Daughters of YS by M.T. Anderson. Can you see? Hold on. Okay. M.T. Anderson, I have many of M.T. Anderson's books. If you guys don't know who M.T. Anderson is, M.T. Anderson writes a lot of young adult literature. One of the books that he wrote was one of my favorites of all time, Feed. You basically have human beings who are implanted with chips. It's like way in the future, people are visiting the moon, and in a way, it's not really scientifically based as far as like when you think about the logistics, but it's all about companies. Basically, they walk around with feeds, and so if you walk into a mall or if you go into any store, you'll have in your feed, in your neural connection, you'll hear advertisements. So you'll walk into the mall and it'll say, oh, last time you were here, you liked these pants. Oh, this time you were here, you like that. Would you like this? So everyone's constantly bombarded with these messages in their brain. And people who don't have money are not able to afford feeds, which can help in various ways. You definitely have a leg up in society when you have one, but they come with a negative impact when you get them later in life because your family couldn't afford them when you were younger. So there's just many layers, technology, privacy, commerce, class. It's written in a way where you really hear the slang, and the voice is really, really important in this book. So if that bothers you, it may kind of drive you nuts. I recommend the audiobook of M.T. Anderson's Feed, because it is, I actually own the audiobook. I listen to it probably 2 or 3 times a year. It's so good. He writes a lot of interesting, weird things. Like this one was Landscape with an Invisible Hand, which is basically like an alien comes down and this boy's trying to figure out like what to do in this small town regarding the aliens. And then this other book called The Astonishing Life of Octavian Nothing. It's about a young boy who's enslaved, and he undergoes a series of experiments regarding his intelligence. He's really precocious. He's practically, like, I believe, like a genius, and he undergoes some experiments, but he doesn't understand the world totally because he's been kind of sheltered from that. And this is a 2-part book. So he is a boy dressed in silks and white wigs and given the finest of classical educations. Raised by a mysterious group of rational philosophers, known only by numbers, the boy and his mother, a princess in exile in a faraway land, are the only people in their household assigned names. So he's beginning to wonder what's going on behind his studies. Like, why are they studying him? What is really happening? What is the truth about his life? So they're so mysterious regarding the synopsis. I don't think the author wants you to know too much going in, but I believe in another synopsis that I read that he's enslaved and he just doesn't know it. They're just doing this whole like social experiment on him, and maybe his mother, I'm not sure. But I've always wanted to read this, but I always wanted to be in the right mindset to read it. But yes, M.T. Anderson's The Astonishing Life of Octavian Nothing. I was looking down, I was like, I hope my socks aren't like all dirty underneath. They shouldn't be, but you know how sometimes like you might like put on a shoe and anyway, you know what I mean. I also read The Ministry for the Future. I have this on ebook, but it's by Kim Stanley Robinson, who writes science fiction. The Ministry for the Future, I'll just say this. It was really, really long. There were some amazing parts in there. I could definitely hear his agenda loud and clear. I felt like pretty much he is of the group of people who believe that human beings have definitely done a lot of terrible things on Earth, but also that perhaps there's this whole theory of like what is 10%? I forgot what it is. I forgot the name of it, but I've known about it for forever. A group of people who believe that human beings should leave most of the planet to nature, and that we should only live in certain areas and leave the majority of the planet, 90% or 85%, just to without any human contact at all. Allow Earth to replenish itself and just to leave it alone and to live in balance. Those also tend to be the same people who will get very, very... Now, that means that human beings would be living in super cities. Super cities, cities off to the coast, which is like, okay, but now you're controlling where people live. And then when you're looking at a lot of populations, especially indigenous populations, so are you saying that because of what a lot of people are doing on Earth, or in general, a lot of nations, the way they're handling industry and pollution, that people who are indigenous should then be forced to leave that land? Or are you just saying they can stay, but under certain caveats, and who are you to tell all of humanity where they can live and where they can't live? Also, these are people who tend to be very heavy into that whole population stuff, meaning there's too many people, we need to not have such a big population. And then you get into population control, and then you also get into who dictates, well, there's too many people on this planet? Oh, well, who do you think? Who do you think is too many people? Most of the people that's too many people are going to be people of color. Because out of the 7 billion people, the majority of all those billions of people are people of color. So I'm like, and who's deciding like who needs to not be having so many kids? I have a lot of thoughts about that. You can already tell I'm not feeling it. So as I was reading the book, I was looking at some of these cool ideas and some of them that sound good on it. A lot of these ideas sound good on their face, like when they talk about cryptocurrency, because they were saying so many people skip out of paying their fair share of taxes and all of these things. I'm with that. I agree. But aside from that, if you do close all these loopholes, which is wonderful, and you make it so people just don't have crazy amounts of money while people are starving and dying, that sounds good. But the whole thing is that you want to close all loopholes, but if you digitize all the money, no one can escape because you can see everything. On its face, that sounds like a good idea because you can weed out corruption. But then on the other flip side is that means that anything you buy, anything you use money for, anything you purchase is all tracked. I don't think that's a good idea at all. Then you get into notions of privacy. Everything has a flip side. So many things can sound so great, and then you look at the flip side of it and you realize that it can be very invasive or oppressive. And so the Ministry of the Future has so many great ideas and so many big ideas, but they are also equally horrifying and terrible ideas. While I was reading, which so much of it feels like an essay, there was a little bit of storyline. If you're interested in the topic, you may be interested in this book, but so much of it doesn't feel like a story. It feels kind of like someone kind of not preaching at you or lecturing to you, but giving you the information, but you can clearly see where they're coming from, which is okay. It's just that I happen to disagree vehemently with so much of what was in there that I was literally turning the page and saying, oh no, thank you, no ma'am. That said, moving on. Let me go to 2021 on my Goodreads because, yes, No Heaven for Good Boys by Keisha Bush. You already know that's the February selection for Amory's Book Club. This book was so good, you guys. Another book that's one of my, let me sit back here. Another book that's one of my favorite books of all time. I'm not going to tell you what it's about because I just recently had the announcement video and I don't want to be redundant for those of you who saw it. But if you didn't check it out, this cover is what grabbed me. And when I saw it, the cover grabbed me initially because I was like, ooh, what's that? And oh, it looks like it's going to be sad. And it's going to break my heart. And it's amazing. It's fantastic. We're going to speak to Keisha on the 28th, I believe, the very last day of the month. And I'm super excited because she did her thing with this book. Loved it. One of my favorites of all time. And that's her debut novel, and I'm looking forward to more from her. Another one I read was To Be Taught If Fortunate. This was by Becky Chambers. To Be Taught If Fortunate. This was really good. It was a short novella. To Be Taught If Fortunate is oh, my stomach, is basically about a group of scientists who go into space. And is this recording? Yes. And they are searching out other worlds, and because they're traveling so long, when they go into cryo, their bodies change and adjust to whatever environment they're going to be in at this planet. So this planet is this way, this planet is that way. When we're sleeping, we have patches that enhance, change our bodies and oxygen levels, blood levels, that kind of thing. And our capabilities make you stronger, make it so you can lift up your own weight, and if you're in a place that where you need more strength because you're fighting the gravity, for instance. And so they're traveling through space because something has gone wrong with the planet, with planet Earth. And so they're like, we're going to continue our mission and try to find another habitable planet. I really enjoyed it. It was really quiet and poignant, and they go to different planets. Funny enough, some of the, whenever you read a book, sometimes you can't help but wonder. Sometimes you won't wonder. Sometimes you'll know pretty obviously. But a lot of times an author's point of view, their worldview will be in the book. And I won't say that her worldview is similar to that of Kim Stanley Robinson's, but sometimes you can read things and you definitely know that human beings are doing some terrible things to the planet. But sometimes it can almost seem as if people feel like we're like this pestilence on the planet, and that we're destroying it, and we actually don't deserve to be here as much as the animals. I know that sounds a little like I'm being extra, and I will say, I'm the first one. You guys have heard me say this. Sometimes I feel like human beings suck. We're terrible. We're horrible to animals. It makes me sick how we can just kill life. I wish that none of us ate meat, and I still eat meat a little sometimes, but it's just, morally, I just feel like it's horrible. And I just feel like we're just really messed up, and we just pollute, and we don't even care about not only the planet, but the children who are breathing this pollution. So I will be the first one to say, yes, human beings do some terrible things to the planet. We have to make sure that we're having safeguards and environmental protection, etc. I won't go so far as to say that I don't think that human beings should be here as much as other animals. We evolved, just like everything else. And we have our place, just like all other animals. And there are animals that will come through and ransack the habitat, that will kill other animals or insects. There are insects that will come and completely take over the because somehow they move up into an area, often by climate change. A lot of that's due to human beings, but not all. And they will completely destroy the habitat for other animals. So it's not just human beings who do this, although we have the wherewithal to make sure that we can look at the long-term effects of it. But one can also argue that long-term effects and thinking things through and being fair and being kind is not part of evolution, is not part of this planet, is not part of what's inherent in animal instinct. It's survival. But unfortunately, human beings might be the demise of ourselves. That said, I said all that to say I felt like I was still getting a little hint of that worldview from the book. And maybe I was picking up on it more, and might have been a little rubbing against it a little more because I just recently finished The Ministry of the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. I did really enjoy the book though. So if you're into something quiet, not too long, and just kind of fascinating, To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers would be really good. Another book that I recently read that really surprised me just because I wasn't expecting so much amazingness is The Electric Kingdom by David Arnold. And this book is about, what can I tell you with that? I don't want to spoil it. Okay, this is the first David Arnold book that I've read, but it's not his first, it's not a debut. It's a young adult novel. But there are adult POVs in here as well. So you don't really have to pay attention too much to the fact that it's young adult if you're not a person who normally reads young adult. I think the story goes down really well regardless. So basically you have a story in which there has been an apocalypse. There's been what they call the fly flu. And not only are people dying or have died from this plague that kills people, the flies themselves, which are actually, a variant of bee that has escaped the lab because they were trying to do some experiments and things like that. You get people dying from being bitten and being eaten alive, essentially, and lifted up. It's just very horrific. A lot of drama in that death, but you get that. And you have a group of survivors, and they're trying to make their way to safety. But it's not just that. So you have that one element, but you do have a quantum, should I just tell you, you see it here. A time wormhole, we'll say that. A time wormhole. So you do have that scary apocalyptic element, but you have a science fiction type of element as well. And it's a beautiful tale. It really touched me in a way that I wasn't expecting when I started it. I was thinking I was going in, it was going to be really interesting, this whole plague thing, and then also some cool kind of like sci-fi element. I wasn't expecting to have my heartstrings pulled that way. I met one of the characters that I just fell in love with. I met a character that endeared me so much, and I can't remember, well, aside from No Heaven for Good Boys, in which those two boys felt incredibly real to me. This was also another young boy who felt really real to me. And I was like, what is I've been having really good reading several weeks, like a great several weeks worth of reading. And I was just so touched by this character, a little 12-year-old boy named Kit. And I highly recommend this. If any of you, like I said, even if you don't normally read YA, it was just fantastic. And even though I understood the conceit of what was happening, and I pretty much figured on pretty early on what was actually happening, it didn't take anything away from the story for me because I was still getting to see the how, and that was really important. So those of you who read a lot of sci-fi, you'll probably catch some of these, catch one of the gists of what's happening pretty early, but it doesn't matter because it's about the how. I don't even think it's supposed to necessarily be a dun-dun-dun surprise necessarily. That's all very vague, but that was really good. And I think, what else did I read recently? I think that's the only one that I want to really talk about that I thought was worth mentioning because I really liked them so much. So we'll stick with those. And now, these are so many books. I'm like, should I go through everything? Some of these, okay, I'll go through everything. But can you see? I can't see. Is this even on? Yes? That's what happens when I don't wear my contact lenses. I feel like I might have told you about this one. Did I tell you about that one? I'm not sure. Okay, well, let me just start with this one because I'm not sure if I did If I did already, I'm sorry. This is Bibliophile, an illustrated miscellany by Jane Mount. Just really pretty designs. You've probably seen her designs on social media before. She basically just draws pictures of books, like stacks of books for people, and she draws different kinds of stacks. So it might be like books about this, books about that, and they might accompany an article. So she just has an entire book in which she's just telling you about different kinds of books and then, you know, giving you a stack. That's an example. So Dystopia, she says what it is, some notable people who have written it, and then she draws a stack of books there, many of which are on my shelves. Different editions of 1984. Techno thrills and cyberpunks. She mentions the authors that are really leading the field. And then, again, stack of books. So just a really pretty book. For those of you with book lovers in your life, they probably would love this. I've given this as a gift to a friend of mine. And it's just like a great book to have for yourself and also as a gift. Okay. I feel like, let me start. Yes, you know what? I'm not going to do this in order because it's too hard to do it in order. They're kind of like all over the place. These are books that I purchased recently since that time that we spoke last about the books that I purchased then. I think this might have been part of it actually. A Sky Beyond the Storm. This is book 4 in Sabaa Tahir's An Ember in the Ashes series. One of my favorite series ever. So can't tell you too much about this because it's book 4. And I think actually now that I'm thinking about it, I did tell you about that. So moving on. The Absolute Book by Elizabeth Knox. This book came out, I believe, in Australia first, or the UK. I've been waiting for this book for probably 8 months or so. I've been waiting for this book for a really long time. All I know is this, because I wouldn't even read the synopsis. A bewitching, action-packed fantasy epic about a revenge killing, a mysterious scroll box that has survived centuries of fires, and the book that changed everything. Now, you may be wondering, if you know so little about it, what made you want to read the book? Because I found that I found out it was a portal fantasy, and it was something that was beautiful in the creation of the world building, or the mystery surrounding this magic in this world. But this is also our world. So again, portal fantasy. It's our world that takes you off to there's a portal that takes you to another world. But what was intriguing to me was that it's really being described as literary fiction. It's like literary fantasy, which I love. And there's not a lot of literary fantasy. There's The Magicians by Lev Grossman, but you don't have so many that meet my personal sweet spot, which is almost like a 50-50, in which the fiction could read like a literary novel and dealing with all the things that we deal with when we're reading literary fiction, right? But also delves very deeply into the science fiction fantasy aspect. So it's not like this tiny little thing that's there, but you don't really touch it, really doesn't really matter, but it actually does affect the plot, and it really is a part of the story. And that's kind of hard to get, those literary sci-fi blends, SFF blends, sci-fi fantasy blends, because everyone has different tastes, and some people don't like a lot of literary trappings with their SFF, and some people don't like too much SFF when it comes to their books. They want it to be more grounded and more realistic, and they don't really like very much SFF at all, and I kind of like both equally. So again, that's hard to find. This is supposed to be one of the best fantasy books to come out in a really long time. It's being lauded as having this great literary sci-fi blend. Wings of Ebony, my girl sent me this book, JL. This was published by Simon & Schuster recently. I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it, and I don't want to say more than what she would like. Rue's family is her whole life. Essentially, a young girl discovers that she has powers, and she's using those powers to come into her own. Rue breaks Gaizan's most sacred law. She returns to Houston only to discover black kids are being forced into crime and violence, and Tasha's in danger of falling sway to the very forces that claim their mother's life. Yes, so you're talking about gods and ancestors, but you're also talking about racism, class. You're blending that in with magic. A bold, inventive, big-hearted, and deeply perceptive vision of a black girl's journey to reclaim her magic from forces determined to destroy her. The parallels to our current reality are unmistakable, and the book brings us all a much-needed ray of hope. And that is the blurb from Nicola Yoon. So looking forward to reading that as well. The Mask Falling by Samantha Shannon. This is book 4. This was This is partly a cover buy, although I really enjoy Samantha Shannon's work. I have book 1 of the Bone Season, which I enjoyed a lot, and I bought books 2 and 3, but I waited so long to read them, I knew I had to reread book 1 to get to book 2 and 3. But I still wanted to support Samantha Shannon with book 4 and get it, because I know a couple of my friends who we have very similar tastes. This is like one of their favorite series of all time. And I've only read the first book, enjoyed it, but again, I have to reread it before getting to books 2 and 3. But I got book 4 because it's so beautiful, and also because I wanted to support Samantha Shannon on her book release. And I really, really, really want to get into the series, because literally 2 of my friends are like, that's one of my favorite series ever. So there's that. Matt Haig, The Midnight Library. I really like Matt Haig's work. I've read, I think I told you about his story, one of them before, How to Stop Time, which is really beautiful. His books tend to be quite thin. They're just short, impactful stories. That one was really beautiful. That one was about a man who doesn't age. So he ages slowly. So he's practically eternal, but he ages slowly, and he's had to watch those that he loves grow up and die around him, including his wife and his child. And so it's just really beautiful and heart-wrenching. And then he also wrote a story called The Radleys, about a family of vampires, and what it would be like if vampires really just lived in, like, you know, our world, and they really truly existed, and we're just trying to just live like regular folks and go. What happens next? That's what The Radley was about. And I think he wrote a book called The Humans, which I did not read yet. I think it's about an alien invasion told through the eyes of the dog. You see what I mean? He has these really cool, intriguing concepts. And so this is the Midnight Library, in which when you pass away, your soul or your lives are packed away, like stored away, like library style. And you can see what would have happened if you chose like different paths. I think that was it. Nora Seed's life has been full of misery and regret. She feels she's let everyone down, including herself. But in the Midnight Library, she has a chance to make things right. The books in the Midnight Library enable Nora to live as if she'd done things differently. I'm not going to read any more than that. Yes, so it's kind of like the sliding doors kind of situation, except she's just seeing what would have happened. And trigger warning too. I usually don't do trigger warnings. I just never do, but I have seen people say that there is contemplation of suicide in this book, so just FYI going into this, I just do want you to know that that is a topic, one of the main topics of the story. The Year of the Witching by Alexis Anderson. I heard Alexis Anderson speaking on a panel, and I was just so intrigued by this. It's a novel about a biracial woman, I think she's black and white, who is a witch, and it's a horror novel, and that's all I know, and I know that it's a slow burn. So her whole thing is also, the author's whole thing was about not having these like gotcha moments, but allowing the dread and the atmosphere to really capture you. And that's all I wanted to know about the story. You might have seen this around quite a bit. Gothic, dark, and utterly enthralling. A young woman living in a rigid, puritanical society discovers dark powers within herself in this stunning feminist fantasy debut. So there's that, and then when you add to the fact that she's biracial, or she looks biracial, they don't mention it in the synopsis, but I believe that's part of it as well. So yes, the author. This was actually purchased because the author had such a great discussion panel that I was just like, I'm in. Alex E. Harrow's The Once and Future Witches. She wrote The 10,000 Doors of January, and I still have yet to read that. I began it when I bought the book, but I think I just wasn't in the right mood. You know when you pick up a book and you thought that you were really ready to read it, and then you're about 2 or 3 pages in and you're like, I could still like this, but right now it's not doing it for me at this moment, and I think it's due to my mood. It was one of those situations. So I still have the book. I still intend to read the book, but I just wasn't in the mood for it. So I think I'm going to go ahead and start with this one first and then go to the other one. She also had a really cool podcast interview that I kept seeing it and I was going to get it, but the podcast interview is what really did it. And she really wanted to write about witches 1893, there's no such thing as witches. There used to be in the wild, dark days before the burnings began, but now witching is nothing but tidy charms and nursery rhymes. If the modern woman wants any measure of power, she must find it at the ballot box. So she really wanted to have something very grounded, but she wanted to also create witches as if they were a very real thing, not just like the Salem witch burnings of old, but if witches actually did exist, people knew it, but they were basically all killed off. So she wanted to make that part of our world. The camera. Every time I do that, it's just because the camera has this thing. I have a Canon, and anytime that it's going to it's like one of the larger ones. I can't remember which D it is. It's like 3D, 5D. I can't remember. But whenever it gets a little bit hot or heated, it will just shut off, which is great, for some important equipment, but sometimes it can be a little annoying when it does that. So yes, the Once and Future Witches, I'm really excited about this one. It's just basically combining politics and witchery somehow. The Sword of Kagan by M.L. Wang. This is actually one of the very few self-published books that I've picked up, but I've heard so many people talk about this story. I think I came across it first on Daniel Green's channel. I think it's a little grimdark, which I don't normally read. I can read a little bit of it, but it's supposed to be phenomenal. I mean, I've seen such high ratings for this book, and people have so many great things to say. It's huge, but it's supposed to be phenomenal. Kirkus Reviews says highly imaginative, intricate, and original. Petroglio says one of the... Oh, Petroglio, he's also a YouTuber as well, and on Goodreads. I follow his reviews on Goodreads. He's like a good read friend. So, wow, they put his quote on here. One of the most intense books I've ever read. The Poppy Boar's darkness meets the last Airbender's elemental magic. I haven't been so emotionally moved by a book in a long while. I believe there's like a mother and son situation here. I actually ordered it from Amazon because I couldn't find it anywhere and I couldn't get it on ebook. But I just went and found that book, and I was like, okay, let me just see. I was going to say went out of my way, but you know what? We go out of our way for all kinds of books, right? But yeah, it wasn't as easy to find. I could not find it in the bookstore, so I had to definitely go online and search for it. Well, it's not really a search, is it, Amerie? If you're going on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com, that's where you get a lot of your books anyhow. Even though a lot of these books I bought in person because I wanted to support, our bookstores, and so I bounced between getting some online, bounced between Barnes & Noble and indie bookstores because I really want to support our indies. All that said, The Dutch House by Ann Patchett. All I know is this is about siblings, 2 siblings. This is when was this? Second World War. It's told over this course of 5 decades. It's a family saga, and it's about 2 siblings who are, I think they're dad lost their money. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, but I don't like to know too much going in. Yes, his family has... At the end of the Second World, Cyril Conroy combines luck and a single canny investment to build an immense real estate empire, propelling his family from poverty to enormous wealth. His first order of business is to buy the Dutch House, a lavish estate in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Meant as a surprise for his wife, the house sets in motion the undoing of everyone he loves, and it centers around 2 siblings. I really enjoy Ann Patchett's work. I really liked The Commonwealth, and I've been meaning to read Bel Canto, and I feel like there was another book that I read of hers that I cannot remember off the top of my head. 2 middle grades. Root Magic by Eden Royce. You just have a brother and sister, and I think they go down south. With school integration arriving in South Carolina, Jez and her twin brother Jay are about to begin the school year with a bunch of new kids. But the biggest change comes when Jez and Jay turn 11 and their uncle, Doc, tells them he's going to train them in root work. And so I saw this, and anytime there's a chance to support kids of color, black kids, Asian kids, I want to make sure I support because I want to also for River to see himself in lots of different stories and lots of different books. And I think it's really important to also make sure we support the authors so they can continue to put out these stories for all of our kids, because it's not just kids of color who need to read books and stories about kids of color. White kids need to see these stories as well. So one, they don't feel that everything's centered around them all the time, and because that can do them a disservice later, and they can understand and appreciate different cultures, right? So it's good for everyone. And this is Amerie and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. And she's a young girl who basically, she discovers magic exists. Her brother is missing, apparently killed, abducted, missing. I don't know the details of how they do it in the story, but he's gone. And she believes that he's still alive. And everyone's like, no, no, Amerie, he's gone. And she needs to accept the truth, but she just refuses to accept it, and then finds out that there's she discovers a ticking suitcase, and she discovers there's this whole magical school, this whole new world that she just never knew existed, and she feels that somehow her brother may have something to do with it. So I didn't even read it yet, but I'm already like, no, he has to be alive. Her brother, I believe that her brother is alive. I'm gonna move with that. This is Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere. It's a classic. This whole other underground world, underground magical world in London that exists, and it's published in 1997. Yeah, I have always heard about it, never read it, and so I bought this to check it out. George Saunders, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. This is essentially like a masterclass in writing. He's just giving his thoughts on how to create story. I really enjoyed A Lincoln in the Bardo, and when I saw that this had come out recently, I think I got it the first week. There's something about, right? Something about books, like pages, like the way that books smell. Like literally, I will stick my nose in a book to smell the book. And this one, which I was looking forward to, and I wanted to get so many times I would go to the bookstore, and then I didn't, and then when I finally was ready to get it, it was gone, and I had to order it. How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Zhang. And let me see, what can I tell you without even spoiling myself? What makes a home a home? Ba dies in the night. Ma is already gone. Now this, I believe, takes place during the gold rush, and you're following an Asian family. Newly orphaned Lucy and Sam, ages 12 and 11, are suddenly alone and on the run. With their father's body on their backs, they roam an unforgiving landscape dotted with giant buffalo bones and tiger paw prints, searching for a place to give them a proper burial. Along the way, they must battle their own secrets, the illusion of the American dream, and each other. Set against the twilight of the gold rush in a reimagined American West, How Much of These Hills is Gold is a sweeping adventure story, an unforgettable sibling story, and the announcement of a stunning new voice in literature. With fiercely original language and a story that is both epic and intimate, C. Pam Zhang has written a remarkable novel about a family bound and divided by its memories. So that is C. Pam Zhang, the author, photo here. This is her work. She's been awarded support from Tin House, Bread Loaf, Aspen Words, and Everywhere. Currently lives in San Francisco. This was a really hard book to get, you guys. And I think it's because the book did really well, and I think it took off, and I don't know if it's the publisher wasn't totally ready. Well, Riverhead, they should have been ready. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but it was just hard to get, and they were out of stock for this book. So I think they had to hurry and print a lot more quickly. So those were my recent reads. So glad to have spoken to you guys today and just to share some of these reads. Let me know below like what you're reading, what's going on. We should have this, by the time that you see this video, we will have possibly this bookish space going on that well, yes, when you see this video, it's probably, my Patreon will already be going on. And so we should have this space and everything set up already to have these discussions, because like I said, it's in the video, it's hard to have discussions back and forth, like really exchanging without talking in real time. And I want to talk to you in real time when it comes to some of this stuff. I want to sit down and just chat, and we're just like really talking in real time, whether we're typing in real time, and then you're talking with each other in real time, or we are via screens having some coffee and lattes, and we're having a real conversation, and you can hear me and I can hear you in real time again. So yes, if you haven't already had a chance to check it out, definitely head on over to my Patreon. I will put the link there. And also, side note, I've been living in sweatpants. Hasn't everyone been living in sweats? I know every time you see me, I'm in some different kind of sweats, right? But these are, what was that? I don't know. But these are River Row sweats. that I'm so happy to have because like I said, I love sweats. I love sweatpants. But I like them to look crisp. You know, I don't like to look messy. I don't like to feel like I rolled out of bed. However, I will say these are really super soft. They feel like you could go to bed in them if it was cold. They're like a jogger loungewear. That's the weight. I would say that's the weight of these sweatpants. Is they are like jogger loungewear weight regarding the fabric, and super airy and super comfortable. So perfect for any time, extremely perfect for the time we're in now. Yeah, and so I will put the link for River Row down there too. And also there will be Amory's Book Club. There should be Amory's Book Club sweatpants as well there. So yes, I guess that's it. That's it for now. I will talk to you later. I hope you guys are feeling okay, feeling safe, and feeling blessed. Until next time, I will talk to you later. She said as she walked to the camera again, turned it off. Bye.